talk about some stuff. So, we're doing Sea Lion today. He's cute. And this time around we have a physical party. Haven't done one of these yet. We had a magical party for both Golem and... what was the other one? Mist. We're at physical now, which is where I personally run into a little bit of an issue. Since I have no form of 50% attack buff and Haska, also known as the Shout buff. So what I've had to do instead to make up for that fact is carry both Onion Knight, who is normally a 30% attack buff, but is kind of insufficient for buffing the party, a physical party against the large defense pools of Magicite bosses. And I also searched for a naked or a 50% attack buff with some other form of additional benefit. And the best I came up with, which is actually a fairly decent Super Soul Break, is Minfilia's. Because she is also a support 5, so once she uses her 50% attack buff, she can then turn into a very competent Entrust battery. Not as good as Ferris was in the other two fights, because Ferris was able to use better RMs for this purpose, where Minfilia has to use an entire Soul Break gauge at the start of the fight. Which I have found has been better than using a Striker on her. To Wrath Up twice, then use it, and then Wrath Up more. I found that was too slow. So using Minfilia's Super Soul Break at the start of the fight was ideal for me. So I have a 30% attack buff coming from Onion Knight and a 50% coming from Minfilia. And Refia, by default, with her burst, gets 20% and can add another 30% onto that with her Command 2. And Bart's, with an X mode, gets plus 30% attack. Bismarck is absolutely more cute than Sea Lion. That is true. I have retired Aphmau for this fight, since she is a magic and mind buffing healer. I do not have a healer that buffs the damage potential of my physical characters. So I have defaulted to my strongest throughput healer, which is a Shtola. But here's the crazy thing, is since I'm using Mako Might on Minfilia and Onion Knight, I just elect to not use Soul Breaks on my healer at all in this fight, and go straight into using a double cast Legend Materia and a double cast Record Materia, giving her the capability to triple cast as a way to pseudo take care of area of effect healing. Instead of, like, in the middle of the fight, spending a 2.5 second casting her Soul Break if I gave her something like a Striker. I prefer to just have her do the 1.65 every single turn of Curata, which I have at R3, because Curata is awesome, and it has 8 charges, so it lasts the entire fight. My Magicite I'm bringing to this fight are not anything to write home about. I did not farm Living Flame enough, and when I did farm Living Flame, it was after the anniversary event, so I was unable to bring it to the Orb Fest and get them leveled up. So they're really poorly leveled Magicite, but all that really matters for the purpose of this fight is having Mom Bomb in my primary, so I can inflict Sea Lion with Imperil. Most of the damage in this fight moves through Refia and Bart's, but Onion Knight contributes as well. This is, as I noted during the Golem fight, Onion loves Sea Lion and Golem because he's able to use the 5-star ninja magic to assist everybody, and it is extremely potent, especially because of some festival pulls I had in the past. For the Reigns and Refia BSBs, I have a 8-star Creel Whip, which is plus fire, and a red armlet from the Tyro Selection 2, which gives him 2 plus 20% fire equipment. So it really helps out that that Raging Storm. No, not Raging Storm. Whatever the 5-star Fire Ninja ability is. Anyway, it does 20,000 damage every turn, which is the important part. Okay, so we're gonna get into the fight, and then I'll go over the... Oh, no, actually, I want to talk about Refia's RM here. Refia is notorious for her damage cap issues. She does such an excessive amount of damage because of her combination of self-crit and self-crit damage buffs that giving her damage RMs usually is a whole lot less effective than it is on other people. So what I've done here instead is, because we're going to be entrusting to Refia for most of the fight, and she's going to get off some good casts of her BSB, which takes advantage of the end fire and the fact that she crit buffs herself. We've instead given her the Thunder God status as an RM instead, because we want to reduce those 2.5 cast times to something a little more manageable. Because remember, giving her plus damage is less impactful. But Thunder God works great on her. So, starting up the fight. And yes, chat, I am using Devout's record materia that gives a 15% chance to dual cast white magic. Smoldering Fire, thank you, Ricky. So, Refia is a speedy little girl, and she goes first in this fight. So we're starting it from top to bottom, and it's since we do not have attack buffs enabled on the first turn of the fight, I just start using Life Siphon with both Refia and Bartz, because there's really not much point in actually using damaging abilities. So might as well capitalize on the down turn and use Life Siphon instead. And we see that changes on the second turn for Bartz. And everything else here is pretty easy. We 50% attack buff with Minfilia, 30% attack buff and haste with Onion Knight, and then wall with Y'shtola. We are playing risky here with Y'shtola by using wall on first turn. Sea Lion is not a lightweight like the other two bosses. He will dish out some real damage if you're not careful. And I do believe we do take an area of effect on one of the turns before we get our stuff ready. So see, Refia's Life Siphon goes off quite quickly, which is nice. Because what we're going to do here, and here's another benefit for her, with her having the Thunder God status, is that she Life Siphons extremely quickly to start the fight to get her BSB off at a specific time, and on Minfilia's third turn, because she's able to Soul Break first turn, Wrath second turn, and then Entrust on the third turn, she entrusts to Bartz. So Bartz will generate Soul Break slower. He starts first turn Life Siphoning because there's no reason to do anything else. And then because Bartz is so good with casting Soul Breaks, or sorry, Spell Blades, the SB gets me every time. Even when he doesn't have his USB up, and then we are using his USB in this fight, he's still an extremely potent Spellblade user. That's how powerful his Spellblades are. So I don't want to Life Siphon on Bartz, and we don't. So he gets one level in one Wrath and Trust, while Refia is on her own for the start of the fight. And because of the Thunderlord status, Thunder God status, and Bart's hitting vulnerability and getting the Entrust, they get their Soul Breaks active at about the same time. Or usually would, but we do run into a bit of a complication. Yes, Ricky. I use party order. And I did note that in the other videos. So Refia's ATB is already up for a second time. She just keeps Life Siphoning. And this is a very similar situation to the Mist Dragon Magicite, where depending on how many times she gets hit, it determines what she's able to do from this point. And this is a second turn of getting defenses up for Onion Knight and Ishtola. They carry Shelga and Protecka. We've been sort of fortunate so far, haven't taken that much damage, not having these up yet. And now we do a third turn of Life Siphon on Refia. And definitely fortunate in this fight. We're probably, yeah, we're going to get Shelga and Protecka off before taking any significant amount of damage, which is great. But I'll pause it when we get up to Refia's ATB. And as I talked about in a previous fight, Onion Knight, BSB first turn, regular ability second turn, and then as soon as his ATB comes up on the third turn, that is exactly the 10-second mark when your Magicite comes up. And I have taken a liking to having Onion Knight do my Magicite usage. Okay, now we are at Refia's ATB. And notice that she did 3 Life Siphons over the course of the fight. That gives her 450 Soul Break points. You need 500 to use a Soul Break. The fact that all 3 abilities that were used so far, and a fourth, this fourth Blizzard is Sea Lion's 4th turn, none of it hits Refia. And that would generate 50 Soul Break points that would be necessary, and that's why I waited to use the next ability with Refia. We did run into a... This is very, very slow. And I'm surprised that this attempt... it just goes to show the strength of my fire team, I suppose. Normally we want to be using Dance of Carnage on this turn, but we have to delay it an entire turn, which is a huge time loss. But that's something I needed to... I would normally, if I was going for an ideal Sub30, I would reset until Refia got hit at least once. So she could Life Siphon, Life Siphon, Life Siphon, and then Dance of Carnage. But instead, since I know that the next turn I'll be able to Dance in Carnage, I'm just going to switch over to Ruby Spark instead, and then use that. You know, in hindsight, I should have used Fires Within, because Refia gets plus Monk damage in a record dive. But, well, too late now. And now, third turn with Minfilia, she entrusts to Bartz. So his Soul Break comes up at about the same time that Refia's does. And now we Kurata every single turn for the rest of the fight with Ishtola. Very simple. And hope for some sweet double or triple cast procs. The Mom Bomb and Perils, which is good that it goes off now, because now we're using the Burst Soul Break of Refia and the USB of Bartz this turn. And Onion Knight does his onion thing and just spams the 5-star Fire Ninja ability. He's very simple to deal with in this fight as well. And you see me using Refia's Command 2 here. With the 50% attack buff from Minfilia and the 30 from Onion Knight, she is over soft cap at this point. And normally I would say don't bother using the Command 2. But the Command 2 actually does an okay amount of damage, and I've gone over it, and I'm like 99% confident that by using her Command 2 here at 15 seconds, it does increase her damage output on all subsequent actions enough to justify using it over her Command 1. Because it's not like a super Command 1 like Reigns, who gets that Instacast proc, which just really amplifies the damage output that he gets. For her, she does have an amazing Command 1 with this increased critical damage, but it's overall she still benefits more from having the even above soft cap attack buff from her Command 2. Now, I'm using the 40% Spellblade damage RM for Bartz, so his USB entry doesn't actually do a whole lot of damage because it's not benefiting from the RM at all. Soul Breaks are not considered abilities and don't have ability schools. A little more Smoldering Fire, and since we still don't have a Soul Break active on Refia, we go into using her Command 1 now. And Bartz is very simple from this point. He just uses Blazing Twin Strike, and should use it to the end of the fight, but I actually mess up at some point. And now Memphilia just goes into Entrusting Refia mode, because Refia using multiple caster or BSB is extremely beneficial. Due to that crit buff and the end fire, and she has 2 pieces of fire equipment on. You'll see upon our first recast that it does quite a bit of damage. And here we see Y'shtola giving us the dream of a triple cast Curata, which is unnecessary because we do have Last Stand active. It's not that dangerous of a fight, even with a non-healer Soul Break user. And you just see Bartz doing Bartz things. Doing 20,000 with the Spellblade itself, and then going off with the 8 strike barrages after that. And now we're using our first recast of Refia's BSB. Oof. First 3 weren't crits, but you see the total damage output was pretty damn impressive. More 8 strikes from Bartz. Wow. Didn't get any dual casts, or triple casts, or quad casts with Bartz, but we had some nice chases. And here's where I made a mistake. I elected to use his USB again instead of just using Blazing Twin Strike, which would have done more damage. Would most likely have done more damage. I suppose he could have done a single attack and then a 2-hit chase, and that wouldn't have been as damaging as this. This is a 10-hit, or an 8-hit. So it's 24,000 damage. But anyway, it would have made a whole lot more sense to use Blazing Twin Strike. And after the ability upgrade at the end of November, it'd make even more sense. Because Bartz wants to use Spellblades. They're that powerful. They're more powerful than Soul Breaks. Anyway, that was a pretty simple Sub30. Does anyone in chat have anything to say? Oh, it is 10 hit? Okay. Then 33. It was a really low 3,000 per hit. I didn't have a whole lot to say about this group. I mean, Memphilia makes everyone safe. Like, Refia survived the end, though her actions were done because of the Last Stand. Fire Resist. If I didn't have Fire Resist on, there's no way Y'shtola would have been able to solo heal this with just single target cures. Well, unless I triple casted Curata every turn, but that's different. And I don't even think that would have done it. Or not Fire Resist, sorry, Ice Resist. I don't know if this is relevant, but you got Refia LM2, you don't really need to use your Command 2. Well, yeah, it's relevant, and you're right. Yeah. If there's anything for me to say about this, it's not really mechanics-based. It wasn't as cool as the Golem or the Mist Dragon fights, but Refia with Jester BSB is exceedingly strong, and Bartz with his USB is everything that we thought he was. He doesn't need an element. I think those are those BSBs that he gets, his 2, 3, 4, 5 BSBs that given the N elements of his 4 attacks, or his 4 elements, are largely for flavor, because I think it's a lot harder to make a team work where you use both of those, because he needs to get entrusted, and it's a lot of time spent casting soul breaks. So while I do believe it's better to have the BSBs than it is to not, I don't think it's like, oh my god, I've got his USB and BSB for this element, I'm in the clear. It's really just all about the USB. I think just having his USB means that you are, you're legend diving Bartz, and you're laughing at least 3 of the elements. Golem doesn't really care what he thinks about wind, or Bartz thinks about his wind damage, but he's amazing with just the USB. Another thing I wanted to mention, I just remembered, OSBs. I know there were times, maybe like old watchers, viewers knew that I used to rag on USBs a little bit, because for a pure damage output perspective, they generally weren't as good as BSBs. But the thing about OSBs is, over time, they've just gotten better, because the game has shown that there's nothing that can do the job of OSBs as well as OSBs can. Well, until UOSBs come out, but that's distant future stuff. But in this fight, if you'll remember, the last turn that Bartz makes is to use his to recast his USB. I figured, hey, it's a 7.0 multiplier spread over 10 hits. He has ×2 cast speed from his X mode active. Let's cast it and do some damage. As it turns out, it didn't do a whole lot of damage. And that's because of his RM. But what would have been better, even if I had some lucky stuff happen, if I had casted Blazing Twin Strike instead and used this X mode to its fullest extent, what would have been better would be Bart's really bad OSB. Most OSBs in this game are a 12.0 multiplier, while Bart's pays a heavy price for it being quad elemental of a 10.0 multiplier. It's really quite low. But that wouldn't matter, because it's the last thing that he does in the fight. And if it's the last thing that you do in a fight, then that is the perfect time to use an OSB, because an OSB gets all of its damage done within a single action, excluding Orlandu and Noctis. But it gets everything done within a single action, and that's it. So it's a perfect thing to use as a finisher. So even Bart's weak OSB would have been an ideal finisher that I could have used in this fight. And that just, I think that emphasizes how powerful it is to have OSBs on people that already do a lot of damage. So you want them to be viable and doing good damage for you during the fight, so they can close out with an OSB. OSBs are good on good characters. It's generally a little more difficult, but sometimes you can swing it at making an OSB work on a bad character. But in this case, even Bart's bad OSB would have worked for him here. Okay, now we'll just listen to chat for a few. I think that's all I needed to say. Another reason to say